yesterday's news.
Hello and welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news of the day through the papers of yesterday. Well, quite recently, Lord Street flats have been back in the news. They're going to be sold off and redeveloped at some stage, but being sold off by Douglas Corporation. It seems been there for, I would imagine, most people's lives, built in the 1930s. And I thought before they disappear forever, perhaps we should have a little dwell back to see what the papers had to say about them. And indeed, they made a sizable article in the Isle of Man Examiner of Friday, May the 6th, 1932, under the heading, Another New Landmark, this being when they were fresh, built and ready for use. Another ugly blot, the article starts, has now been wiped out of the borough of Douglas, and in its place has grown a pile of masonry commonly known as the Bigwell Street Flats, but by resolution of Douglas Town Council rechristened Lord Street Flats. Anyone remember Bigwell Street? In future, the whole of the new street, which it is hoped will extend from the railway station to Victoria Pier, will bear the name of Lord Street, as it does to this day. These new buildings are at once pleasing to the eye and without doubt add beauty to a town. Are they beautiful? That must live up to and maintain a well-earned reputation for its attractive beauty. The exterior elevations of the buildings are a credit to all concerned in the erection of them and give the flats the quiet dignity and appearance of high-class residential property. I leave it to you to decide if that's how you view them today, perhaps. The scheme in the new street consists of 4 blocks of flats, each 4 stories high, with main central entrances and access in the rear by staircases and balconies, and provide 12 two-roomed, 36 three-roomed and 22 four-roomed apartments. Each floor is entirely self-contained, the two-roomed apartments comprising a living room, bedroom, scullery, larder, coals and WC, the 3-room set, a living room, 2 bedrooms, bath, hot and cold water, scullery, larder, coals and WC, and 4-roomed, a living room, 3 bedrooms, bath, hot and cold water, scullery, larder, coals and WC. The arrangement of the flats at Quine's Corner is similar to that of the dwellings in Bigwell Street, but the 6 apartments in this block are of the roomed type detailed above. It would not be out of place to mention here the weekly rentals of the apartments, which are as follows, all being inclusive of rates. 2-roomed, any guesses? 5 shillings. 3-roomed, 7 shillings. And 4-roomed, 9 shillings. The common lodging house at the junction of Queen Street and Lord Street contains 2 apartments for houses let in lodgings with dormitory accommodation for 30 males and 20 females, together with day rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms, lavatories, etc. Also within the building there is a 3-roomed compartment for a caretaker tenant. The flats on the different stories are approached by main central entrances and stairways. The staircases, which along with balconies and floors are fire resisting, excellent, are made of reinforced concrete and permit of easy access to the balconies at the rear. The buildings or the outward walls are constructed of brickwork built in cement with cavity walls on top of cement foundations, and reinforced concrete floors separate one story from another. Well, they've certainly stood the test of time from that point of view. With the exception of the windows being replaced, I don't know how much other work's been done. The interior fittings are very elaborate and up to date, and their utility and style of arrangement should readily commend themselves to the occupants. The Yorkshire range, with back boiler, copper circulating system and hot and cold water to the sink, has been installed throughout. The sinks are white glazed, the made for an electric cooker in any apartment. One of the big problems of the housewives, the drying of clothes, has been solved as far as space available will allow. Special provision has been made on the balconies and adjoining walls for clotheslines, pulleys fixed above the kitchen fireplace. We used to have one rather like that. Airing racks and complete linen cupboards heated by the hot water cylinders. The entrances to the staircases and balconies are lighted by means of Wigan waterproof fittings operated by time switches, the main entrances to the balconies being lighted from dark to daylight. An important item regarding the healthiness and cleanliness of the occupants and the rooms has been overcome in a most modern and effective way. For the disposal of refuse, chutes have been provided on each balcony, connected by means of glazed pipes in fireproof chambers to each ground floor, from whence the refuse may be collected without difficulty. All the main rooms of each apartment are in the front of the blocks, well lighted and decorated in oak with walls of sunshine yellow. The sun balconies have been so arranged as to give a considerable clear area for the children, whilst every effort has been made to ensure safety on the staircases and balconies by providing ornamental railings of sufficient height. Again, the front windows are fitted with safety catches which operate after the sash has been raised slightly, and only an adult person can release them further. It does sound like they thought of everything realistically, and whilst perhaps now they do look rather tired, we forget they're almost 100 years old and have rather served their purpose well, you would think. Although, I have to confess here, I have never been into Lord Street flats, and sadly I don't think I ever will be now. We move to 1932, or a little bit later in 1932, I should say, August of 1932, just a few months later on from that, in May. In the Examiner, Friday, August the 19th, strong talk in Lord Street. Well, the tenants are there and celebrating with a few bevies, it might seem. Man who had a drop of drink fined. Mrs. Isabel Barton of Block 2, 79 Lord Street Flats, had Joseph Skillen of Little Island, Shawsbrow, arraigned before Messrs. Mark Corrine, J.D. Fell and J.R. Drinkwater at a Douglas Magistrates Court last Saturday on a charge of using language tending towards a breach of the peace. Complainant said that on August the 2nd she was coming along Lord Street with her daughter when defendant said he would kick her blank, a strong word there I feel, guts in. He threatened to strike her in the face and her daughter pulled her away. Witness had said nothing to him. Mr. Gelling, did he say what you have told us more than once? Witness, yes, and I don't know the man to speak to. Continuing witness repeated further offensive remarks alleged to have been used by the defendant, who she said was intoxicated at the time. Well, there's a surprise. Janie Barton, daughter of the last witness, corroborated what her mother said. Defendant said he was in Lord Street on the day in question. He had had a drop of drink and was on his way home when Mrs. Barton said, "There's another of the Skillen B blank." You can choose your favourite swear word. Drunk again. Defendant objected to what she had said, and because he retaliated, she didn't like it. She took her shoe off and threatened to hit him. His wife was with him at the time. Mrs. Barton from the back of the court, "That's a pack of lies. I'll make another case of this." Mr. Gelling, "Keep quiet." Complainant continued to interrupt, whereupon Mr. Gelling exclaimed sharply, "Can't you keep quiet? Go outside if you can't." In reply to the clerk, Mr. R.C. Cowell, defendant said he had not brought his wife to court as he didn't want to bring her into the matter. He could not say if he had used the language alleged by Mrs. Barton because he had drink on him, but she started first. That's always the case, isn't it? Beware the evils of drink, and whilst we always think it's a modern problem, it isn't, is it? It goes back as long as mankind, I feel. In the Examiner now into 1947, Friday, March the 14th, corporation house rents to go up, soaring rates responsible. Rents of the Pulrose houses and the flats at James Street, Lord Street and New Lord Street may be increased from April the 1st if authorised adjustments to provide for the variation in rate charges are made. The approval of the local government board will be necessary. The Town Council Estates Committee has reviewed the whole question of the rents of these properties under the Rent Restriction Acts. Any increase in rates since 1914 or since the houses were first let may be passed on to the tenants. We're into the 1950s and still in the Examiner. Friday, December the 9th, 1955, and a tenant sues the corporation. Lack of maintenance of a stairway giving access to flat 99 Lord Street is alleged by Susanna Smith in an action she has filed against Douglas Corporation and which was called in the High Court at Douglas on Monday. Claiming damages for injuries and losses, she alleges negligence by the corporation or, alternatively, a breach of a condition implied in the letting of the flat. The case stands adjourned. And I couldn't see what happened to that case. The flat's at that stage, some 23 years old. And perhaps two brighter stories. 1956 in the Examiner, Friday, December the 21st. The Rotary Club Reindeers Programme. The Douglas Rotary Club Christmas Reindeer Tableau. Remember that? Is again touring the town this year as follows. On Friday the 21st of December, leave the garage, 6:30pm for Derby Square, Derby Road, Windsor Road, Christian Road, Mona Street, Finch Road and Lord Street Flats. And then on the next day they would leave the garage, it doesn't say which garage, by Derby Square, 6:30pm for Westminster Drive, Ballabruey, Ballacameen and Devonshire Road. And then the next day, Christmas Eve, they'd be around Derby Square, Queen's Promenade, Broadway, Victoria Road, Little Switzerland, Glencrutchery Road, St Ninians, Woodburn Road, Bucks Road, Victoria Street, and then the Christmas Tree, Strand Street and Chester Street. And finally, again perhaps a story of the times, the Mona's Herald, Tuesday, April the 21st, 1959. Put cash in a safe place, runs the headline. Court advice to robbed widow. Oh dear. A 70-year-old widow who kept her life savings in a suitcase inside a cupboard at her flat in Lord Street, Douglas, was advised by Mr. W.E. Quayle, chairman of the bench, to keep the money in a safer place. Two schoolgirls, aged 13 and 12, admitted robbing the widow, Mrs. Mary Clayton, who formerly ran a sweet and cigarette shop, and taking almost £100 from the suitcase. Can you imagine keeping all your savings in a suitcase in a cupboard? But perhaps it was quite common then, I imagine. Just over £52 of the stolen money was recovered. Also clothing and other articles valued at £14 10 shillings, which the two girls had bought with some of the stolen money. This included 5 bathing costumes, headscarves and a pair of tartan slacks. The girls pleaded guilty to 2 charges of stealing 10 shillings and a third charge of stealing £60. That'd be rather a lot in 1959. And Inspector R.J. Kameen, prosecuting, said they'd asked for 7 further charges to be taken into consideration, bringing the total money involved to £99 and 10 shillings. The girls were sent to detention for 2 weeks and bound over for 3 years, being placed under the care of the probation officer for that period. Inspector Kameen said that when Mrs. Clayton moved to the flat in Lord Street, she took with her a suitcase containing between £300 and £400 in £1 and 10 shilling notes. This she kept in a cupboard used as a store, which was next to the kitchen. The door of the cupboard had a box lock, and Mrs. Clayton said that when she went out, she always hid the key in a different part of the flat. The two girls had called at the flat and asked if they could clean the windows, and Mrs. Clayton had allowed them to do so. She could not recall whether the girls went to the cupboard or not. Too trusting she was, Mrs. Clayton. Constable J.S. Brew said that along with Detective Constable J.B. Callan, he'd interviewed the two girls at Douglas Police Station in the presence of their parents. They'd admitted entering the flat in Lord Street together on several occasions and stealing sums of money from Mrs. Clayton. They had seen the money in the cupboard on the first occasion. They went to the flat to clean the windows. They had not touched it on that occasion, but had each taken 5 shillings from the sideboard. Rather light-fingered girls. A teacher from the girls' school said that while not wishing to in any way minimise what had been done, it could be said on their behalf that they had always been regarded as dependable and reliable and had given no trouble at school. This had come as a great shock and surprise to everyone. Temptation is a terrible thing. In announcing the decision of the bench, Mr. Quayle told the two defendants they had made things extremely difficult for their parents who had provided them with good homes. They should feel thoroughly ashamed of what they had done, and they would have to work very hard indeed to win back their reputations. They must learn to keep their hands off other people's money. Wise advice. Let's hope they did see the error of their ways. Mr. Quayle added he would suggest to Mrs. Clayton she should keep her money in a safer place, or perhaps a bank. In those days, I dare say, as we mentioned there, a lot of people would have kept a lot of their savings in cash, under the bed, in a box, in a suitcase. I don't think Mrs. Clayton would have been alone. Was it safer? Probably not. Is it safe in a bank these days? Probably not. Who knows? Whichever way you look at it, perhaps we'll miss Lord Street flats. Perhaps you won't. But there will definitely be old news. Until next week, cheerio. You're gonna be yesterday's news.